We're all familiar with the stories of Animal Farm in 1984, more or less. They're classic dystopian warnings that everyone loves to quote out of context. The word Orwellian is literally in the dictionary now, referring to his depictions of futuristic totalitarian states. Why is everything on fire? Well, you said to make the kingdom Orwell. No, I said all well. Oh, that's awkward. Yet despite this widespread popularity that has stood the test of time, how many of us have actually read these two books? Or maybe we've just read Animal Farm that one time in school and it's several years ago and it's kind of foggy in our memory now.
How dare you!
Well, I recently reread both of these two books as audiobooks in a collection narrated by Stephen Fry, and I have to say, these are two books that everyone really needs to read in their life. And let's be honest, especially now. 3 reasons why you should read them is first, because popular books are a lot like the game Chinese Whispers. The story changes a little bit in every retelling. That's why it's so important to go back to the source and hear the true version undiluted. Second, because nowadays many people try to force a modern lens onto these stories that are about 80 years old. We apply these books to current politics, usually through a lens of left versus right rhetoric. In reality, the books are about authoritarian governments. They weren't about left versus right, they were about up versus down. That's why it's important to read these books afresh, with your own eyes and with your own interpretation, rather than relying on other people to interpret it for you, who might twist the story to suit them. And third, because the depictions of totalitarianism across both of these two books show a government that thrives on controlling information. That is their greatest power, not their threat of force or their surveillance or their wealth or their power. It's their control of language, because through language they can control what's true. So the best way to fight back against totalitarianism is with information, arming and equipping ourselves with the ability to think, to learn, and to educate. In short, the pen is mightier than the sword.
You want weapons? We're in a library. Books! Best weapons in the world. Arm yourself.
Today we're going to look quite extensively at the life of George Orwell himself and then analyze the stories and themes of both Animal Farm and 1984. But first, here's a cheesy title sequence. To understand the stories Orwell wrote, we need to understand the life that he lived, because this guy had a crazy life. George Orwell was born as Eric Arthur Blair. In 1922, he got his first job out of school as a police officer in Burma, which at the time was under British occupation. He worked there for 5 years and developed a hatred for both the British Empire and also for the people he was helping to occupy. Eric Blair once said, "I was stuck between my hatred of the empire I served and my rage against the evil-spirited little beasts who tried to make my job impossible." There were other quotes that contained racial slurs, which I have not included.
I wonder why.
When Eric caught dengue fever, he returned to England for his health and to pursue his new goal of being a writer. His first book was published in 1934, Burmese Days. This fictional book was inspired by his time as a police officer in Burma. The book is also noteworthy for being much more critical of the British Raj than was normal at the time, showing the darker side of occupation and government control. He was especially critical of a social hierarchy that put the indigenous at the bottom. By this point, Eric Blair had developed a much more sympathetic views of the natives. It was also at this time that he started using the pen name George Orwell.
And so it begins.
In 1936, the Spanish Civil War broke out, and Orwell volunteered to fight on the front lines. Now, for context, Orwell was British, and he had no need to fight for the Spanish, but he volunteered anyway on principle. You see, the Spanish Civil War was quite literally a conflict between right versus left ideology. We had the nationalists, who were led by the fascist military general Franco. Opposing them were the left-leaning Republicans. Yeah, leftist Republicans, can you imagine? It's worth noting here that the nationalists won the Civil War. The reasons why are complex and nuanced, but a major factor was that they received extensive funding from fascist dictators Mussolini and Hitler.
Like Hitler?
Meanwhile, the democratic leaders of Europe decided not to support the Republicans out of a position of non-interference.
Cowards.
During the Civil War, Orwell was shocked by how much both sides weaponized misinformation. They each ran an extensive media propaganda campaign that had no basis in reality, reporting victories where there had been no fighting at all, or avoiding mentioning defeats altogether. The Republicans also smeared their own people.
They're all idiots!
You see, there were many conflicting factions within these two sides. The Nationalists were comprised of fascists, monarchists, conservatives, and traditionalists. Meanwhile, the Republicans included socialists, anarchists, communists, and separatists. So there's your daily reminder that left and right politics are a spectrum, not absolute binaries.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
So Orwell served under the specific group the People of Marxist Unification, or POUM. This group was extensively attacked and smeared by the Communist Party and accused of being fascist sympathizers. This non-stop infighting is another reason why the Republicans lost. The Nationalists were unified under Franco's brutal but efficient leadership, while the Republicans fought amongst themselves. In 1937, George Orwell was shot by a sniper, and the bullet went through his neck, somehow missing his voice box, his spine, and all his major arteries by the narrowest of margins. The bullet even cauterized the wound as it passed through, so he didn't bleed out. He barely survived.
Let's not do that again!
Yet, the miraculous coincidences don't end there. He was literally in hospital when the Republican infighting reached a peak. His group, the POUM, were outlawed, and all the other Republicans started rounding up and arresting their members. George was able to escape arrest because he was in hospital at the time, not the front lines. He boarded a train and managed to escape the country. Even crazier is when he got back to England, he was immediately investigated by the British on suspicion of being a communist. Meanwhile, he was absently put on trial in Spain and accused for being a fascist. Seriously, if I made this up, no one would believe me. Orwell wrote the book Homage to Catalonia about his experiences. It's worth noting here that all of that Republican infighting was largely influenced by the Soviet Union. Remember, Communist Russia was split at the time between the leaders Stalin and Trotsky, who had very different ideologies. After Stalin seized control and Trotsky was expelled from the country, Stalin committed the first of several purges to remove Trotskyism. The effects of this purge were even felt all the way across in Spain during the Civil War, where the Communist Party outlawed the POUM, which was a Trotsky-aligned party. This purge of Stalin directly impacted Orwell, and it gave rise to Orwell's deep personal hatred of Stalin.
I hate him, hate him, hate him!
Fast forward a few years and World War II had broken out, and Orwell was working at the BBC as a journalist. He was also reviewing books for a living. Yes, George Orwell was a book reviewer, which means he was a pretty awesome guy. At this point, Stalin changed sides in World War II and became a British ally. From then on, no one was allowed to say a negative thing about Stalin. Orwell's bosses began to censor anything from the BBC that was critical of Stalin, deeming it unpatriotic. Orwell said in response, "One could not have a better example of the moral and emotional shallowness of our time than the fact that we are now all more or less pro-Stalin. This disgusting murderer is temporarily on our side, and so the purges, etc., are suddenly forgotten."
Unadulterated loathing.
A furious George Orwell resigned from the BBC, and he started working on Animal Farm, a book that was decidedly anti-Stalin. Yes, Stalin was arguably the most powerful and dangerous man in the world, and Orwell wrote this book at the height of Stalin's power just to say, "F*** you" in particular. Like, you gotta admire the guy's audacity. It's worth noting too that his wife Eileen Blair would always help him with his writing. George published 7 books by the time he'd started work on Animal Farm, all to very little success, yet Eileen always helped him plan and outline them. She was especially influential in writing Animal Farm, so you can read more about it in the book Wifedom, Mrs. Orwell's Invisible Life. However, when George finished writing Animal Farm in February 1944, no one would would publish it. Despite the fact that Orwell had an established writer's career with 7 books to his name and he had all of these industry contacts, he was shut down, screamed at, and savagely insulted by all the big publishers of the time, including T.S. Eliot. Some of these rejections were outright abusive. One publisher briefly agreed to release the book, only to change their minds after they were intimidated by a particular agent from the British Ministry of Information. It was later revealed that that agent was actually a Russian spy.
You didn't see that coming?
Holy hell. If all of that wasn't badass enough, George Orwell's house was literally bombed during the London Blitz. Thankfully, he and his wife weren't home at the time that the bombs fell. He then spent hours and hours searching through the rubble, desperately trying to find the manuscript for Animal Farm, and he eventually found it entirely intact. God damn, we nearly lost Animal Farm.
It was too close.
Thankfully, the book was finally published in August 1945, but only after Berlin had fallen and public opinion on Stalin was starting to turn around. But that's enough context on George Orwell's life. There's a lot more, and I encourage you to look up the guy. He definitely had his faults too, but all of that was a way of saying that this guy saw some serious action. He witnessed the worst of humanity, both as a soldier and as a journalist. He saw firsthand how the control of information and censorship could limit people's freedoms and hide the truth.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
One last thing before we talk about the books themselves. As I mentioned at the start, George Orwell did not write with a political left versus right perspective. He wrote against authoritarianism, and I just need to show you what that means for clarity. The organization, the Political Compass, used this terrific tool to measure political leanings, and I'd encourage you to take the test to see where you sit. You see, we measure political left versus right by social and economic issues, but on a completely different spectrum is the up and down measurement, between minimum government oversight at the bottom and extreme government oversight at the top, technically known as libertarianism versus authoritarianism. So that was what George Orwell was writing against. There's even examples in 1984 where the 3 mega world governments are a mixture across the political spectrum. The key thing that they all had in common was that they were 3 different types of authoritarianism. That's the subject of today. With that in mind, let's look at Animal Farm. The animals of Manor Farm are mistreated and neglected by the alcoholic farmer, Mr. Jones. Sick of his crap, they rise up and liberate themselves. They rename their home Animal Farm. But freedom is messy. The pigs take charge, and little by little, the freedom the animals fought so hard for is replaced with another chain. The first thing you'll notice about reading this book is the strong, distinct narrator's voice. This isn't our usual modern story that's limited to one person's perspective. Instead, we have an omnipresent narrator who looks at everyone in the picture on a whole, describes them with simple yet elegant language. It is very easy to lose yourself in the captivating voice.
On the evening our story begins, it was later than usual when Mr. Jones came home from his drinking to make his rounds.
The narrator is very empathetic towards the animals. It shows what they're feeling and thinking, and it does it so sincerely. There's no moralizing or correction or judgment. The narrator doesn't point out the gaps in their logic or other shortcomings, although there are some specific gaps that the narrator leaves out, and the reader is prompted to fill in those blanks. It's very clever. The book constantly encourages you to think and engage with the text. For example, the animals milk the cows on the first day of liberation. Someone asks, what's going to happen to all that milk? And the pig Napoleon says it's much more important that they go and deal with the harvest. So everyone goes out to harvest. And when they came back in the evening, it was noticed that the milk had disappeared. See, the narrator leaves a gap, and we deduce that Napoleon took the milk for himself. The book promotes active reading. Also, Animal Farm had a brilliant balance between clear, simple language and beautiful, mesmerizing prose. I think people forget just how sophisticated Orwell's writing style was. He was truly gifted, because the story is so accessible and easy to read, while still being clever. So remember that both of these 2 books today are not just important stories with important messages, they are well-written works of art. The story itself takes place over a course of years. We see the animals rise up at the urgings of the boar Old Major. They work to implement these 7 laws of Animal Farm to preserve their rights and safeties, and then they take on major projects like the building of windmills and fighting off other farms. Yet slowly, we see the pigs, Snowball and Napoleon, taking greater control, with Napoleon eventually seizing power entirely and enforcing new rules. The plot moves at terrific speed. At only 92 pages long, it's a very quick and easy read, and the narrator sums up these grand events with such short, succinct sentences that hint at a great depth beneath it.
Pretty powerful stuff.
Many of the characters in the book are directly inspired by real people in history. So the farmer is the Tsar Nicholas II, the last king of Russia. Old Major is a combination of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. Snowball is Trotsky, and Napoleon is Stalin. But all of the other side characters on the farm are actually stand-ins for different political beliefs. For example, Boxer the horse is the powerful working class who just obeys orders without question. Benjamin is the intelligent donkey. He's very wise and cynical, and yet he doesn't care that much about politics and ignores a lot of the things around him. The hounds are clearly the violent enforcers who will happily do whatever the dictator tells them to do. And the sheep, the goddamn sheep. Every time there's a public meeting or a debate, the sheep just scream the same motto over and over: 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And they shout so loudly that no one can get a word in. History repeats itself, doesn't it?
Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
These characters may all be a little bit simple and one-dimensional, but they are also very sympathetic and understandable, easy to project ourselves onto them and care about their plight. Despite this story being so focused on themes, Orwell still manages to humanize all of the characters. We should also discuss the tone of the book. This may be written as if it's a kid's book with friendly kids' language, but it is not for kids. Definitely more for teenagers. The whole thing has this undertone of unease and despair. It's bleak. The events are violent and traumatic, and the ending is dark. I would even call the ending hopeless.
Everything is garbage.
Oh, no.
Why make a book so hopeless? Because Orwell was not trying to inspire us. He was trying to warn us. There are 2 most common ways to interpret this story. The first is that Animal Farm is about the Russian Revolution and the rise of Stalin. That's very true. Absolutely accurate interpretation. But another way to look at this book is to consider it to be timeless. This is not about one specific event, it's about any possible event in the past, present, or future in which a tyrant rises to power. The metaphor of the Russian Revolution has a huge number of parallels between the book and real historical events. The animals rising up is the revolution of 1917 itself. The other farmers invading is the Allied intervention during the Russian Civil War of 1918. Snowball's exile is Trotsky's exile. The animal purges are Stalin's purges. There are many layers of historical accuracy to this piece.
Layers!
But I think people are often too limited when they make Animal Farm all about Russia. This has many parallels to different people and places and time. We see how liberation starts with a lot of hope and idealism, and laws were written to protect people, but then over time we see small changes and compromises. This is a process called incremental intensification, and it's designed to sneak up on you.
Peekaboo!
Animal Farm is a cautionary tale to never ignore the small warning signs. Orwell teaches that we should be very alarmed anytime we see crumbling human rights and the perversion of the law, especially when the ruling class is not held to the same legal standards as everyone else.
He said some pretty heavy stuff.
Arguably, the most significant part of the story is the changing of the laws. The 7 laws of Animal Farm are slowly altered one by one until the entire set is different. The most famous of these is, of course, all animals are equal, which is altered, but some are more equal than others. This is an example of the government using language and information to try to change truth itself. Finally, I think the best part of Animal Farm is that there are no wasted details. Every single minuscule decision in this book is rich with layers of meaning. That's why the book has such a high value for rereading, because you always pick up on new details you missed last time. And reading it at different times of your life is like a completely new experience. It really is a masterclass of telling an interesting story and allowing the reader to uncover the themes on their own without preaching those themes at them. Before we move on to 1984, I want to touch on the Animal Farm film adaptions. The classic 1954 film is perfect for kids because it's fucking traumatizing.
Let's mess them up a little.
I watched that movie when I was like 6 years old, and I found the purges to be utterly horrifying, which is the point. Overall, this is a wonderful adaptation, but I must note two things. First, did you know that this movie was funded by the CIA? True story. The CIA saw this story as anti-Russia propaganda and wanted the movie made. Haha, the irony of the CIA supporting anti-authoritarianism. Yeah. Second, the films did make a couple of changes to the story. Most are minor changes, but the most significant is the ending itself. They make it much more hopeful and optimistic, where the book does not offer a positive spin on things at the end. It's an important difference, because the book warns us that once authoritarianism takes over, it's too late. There's no going back. But the movie suggests you can just do another revolution.
What about
Revolution?
You've already had it.
We've had one, yes.
While I do appreciate the movie ending with a more hopeful note, it does sort of water down the message of the story. Speaking of watering down, there is a new upcoming 3D animation movie, Animal Farm. Now, it does look like they're focusing on capitalism and greed as the bad guy, rather than totalitarianism, which is fair enough, I guess. But my god, the trailer is filled with poop and butt jokes and silly animal antics. It looks like it will end with the animals doing a choreographed dance to the latest Timberlake song. Now, I will reserve judgment on it until I see it, but for now it really does look like one of the most watered down adaptions we're likely to see in our lifetime.
You're a disgrace.
Alright, let's move on to the next bad boy, George Orwell's magnum opus. In the far distant future, 3 totalitarian superstates rule the world. In Oceania, what was formerly known as England, the party INGSOC is led by the mysterious Big Brother. Through their constant surveillance, the party purges anyone who commits thought crime, thinking contrary to what the party wants. These criminals become unpersons and are disappeared, and all record of their existence destroyed. Winston Smith works at the Ministry of Truth, where he rewrites all records to suit the state's version of history. He secretly hates the party and is looking for a chance to rebel, even though he knows he'll be caught one day. But before he is caught, he wants to have the chance to truly live, to love, and to experience a moment of real freedom. So let's start by looking at the world building. So this map shows the 3 superstates that rule the world: Oceania in black, Eurasia in red, and East Asia in yellow. Now, if you're curious about the exact politics, it is briefly mentioned that Oceania in black practices English socialism, which is why they're led by the party INGSOC, which is a shortened version of English socialism. Eurasia is in red, it practices neo-Bolshevism, which is a form of communism, and East Asia practices what they call death worship, sometimes called the obliteration of self, which is implied to be a twisted form of Buddhism. The idea is that all of these states went a bit more leftist after defeating all of the right-wing Nazis in World War II. God, could you imagine if we defeated all the Nazis in World War II?
That would be wonderful.
But remember, in 1984, the right and left politics are hardly mentioned because they're just not the issue. It's the extreme government control that's the issue. It's about totalitarianism, not about which side is doing it. Now, the story takes place in London in 1984. INGSOC watches everyone through constant surveillance, through two-way televisions, cameras in every room. There's a constant bombardment of propaganda where the news runs 24/7 and ceaselessly promotes the will of the party. People are encouraged to spy on each other to keep their neighbors in line.
So snitch?
Yes, snitch.
The plot itself spends a lot of time exploring the dystopian situation. There's a lot of different ideas. We see Winston changing documents and altering history. We see news reports that are constantly reassuring people that production and resources are up, even though we can all see in reality that resources are running out everywhere. My god. and there's constant reports of perpetual wars going on in faraway places. We, the reader, don't know if that war is even real, so there's lots of concepts to think about. Now, here's the thing about dystopian concepts: they need to draw from history and the real world. Otherwise, they're just making up hyperbole and creating straw man arguments. All the best dystopians draw from the world around us, and in the case of 1984, Orwell drew directly from his experiences in the Spanish Civil War, his work in the BBC, and the rise of Stalin, as we discussed at length earlier. So this lends the story a powerful air of accuracy and truth. He's speaking with some authority on these matters. It's also worth noting here that Orwell served as a war correspondent in World War II. From February to June 1945, Orwell traveled through France, Austria, and Germany, following behind the Allied troops and reporting on the devastation he found there. You can find his report in his book Ruins. During this time, he witnessed how the Allies were dividing up land between themselves rather than restoring it to its original owners. This was his inspiration for the three superstates that divided the world between them. Perhaps the scariest part of 1984 is the constant surveillance. People have government cameras inside their own home. Their privacy is entirely violated. It's the clearest sign of extreme government oversight. But there is an actual plot to this book. It's not just all about concepts. The story is about Winston trying to find ways to rebel. And the best way to rebel is to find books. Not even kidding. Information, stories, and ideas from people who remember a different time. Winston questions the facts presented by the party and tries to find other people who might be questioning too. A major plot point is Goldstein's book. So Ingsoc is ruled by Big Brother, and his opponent is Emmanuel Goldstein, who wrote an evil book that exposes all of Insoc's crimes and the mode of operating. It is the most banned book in the country. Winston is convinced that if he can just find a copy of the book, it will hold all the answers he seeks. And the story focuses on the love and budding romance between Winston and Julia. Through this plot, Orwell shows that even basic human interactions can be controlled by the government. In 1984, romantic and sexual relationships are strongly discouraged because they inflame the emotions. People are encouraged to reproduce through artificial insemination, as it's considered safer and cleaner. Orwell writes this plot to suggest that even love can be seen as an act of defiance.
That love business is a powerful thing.
The story focuses a lot on the characterization of Winston Smith, our protagonist, and he is a very well-written character. For one, he is a little bit of a blank slate character because we're supposed to project ourselves onto him. Winston's function in the story is to show how we could all easily find ourselves in a situation like this one. His point of view is very effective at making all the dystopia feel real. It's no longer happening to some other people over there, it's happening to us in the here and now.
You never think it's gonna happen to you.
Yet Winston also has some distinct personality. He has trauma around the death of his mother and a fear of rats, and he desperately wants to fight back against Ingsoc because he knows they're lying to him. He has this powerful yearning for something more out of his life. It makes him relatable as hell. Remember, George Orwell worked for the BBC during the Second World War, and he himself had to rewrite history to support Stalin. So he took those feelings of frustration and helplessness and brought them to life in Winston Smith. You can feel his seething hatred.
I can feel your anger.
The other major character in the book is Julia. So she's the love interest in the story, and she's quite fascinating because she wants more from life as well. She wants love and real connection. And yet, Julia doesn't really care about politics or government at all. She lives in this dystopia, but just keeps her head down to avoid attention. She's not a thought criminal like Winston is. It's worth noting in real life that Orwell's wife, Eileen, tragically died in 1945 during a routine surgery. Many people say that the character of Julia was written to be like Eileen as a homage to her. Whenever Julia is on the page, you can feel the author's overwhelming adoration for her. 1984 is also very similar to Animal Farm in its style and tone. The simple yet beautiful language and the sympathetic narrator who doesn't pass judgment on what's going on. And it's a short book at only just over 300 pages. Before I start unpacking these themes, can I just emphasize again, don't rely on anyone to interpret these themes for you, not even me. That's the point of 1984, that the government tells you what to think. So you need to think for yourself.
It's okay to think for yourself.
Now, if you interpret these themes yourself, let's be honest, you might get it wrong too, but you still need to try. We all need to practice the very act of thinking for ourselves, especially now when we have social media and AI and bots all trying to shape our opinions for us. So I am going to throw a bunch of my interpretations at you today, but you should ultimately take them all with a grain of salt and think about it further on your own. First, there's a reason why Animal Farm and 1984 are often packaged and read together, because they work together. Animal Farm shows how a totalitarian government rises to power, and 1984 shows what happens after. They are two sides of the same coin. So the biggest theme that stays with me from this book is just how hopeless it all was. The book does not have any silver lining at all. It's a fucking tragedy. Orwell seems to suggest that once a country has reached this point of total authoritarianism, there is no going back. You have to catch it before it happens. That's what makes this dystopia so chilling.
Abandon all hope, he who enters there.
Alright, we get it.
Another major theme is to cling to what you know is true. The famous Orwell line is, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." I recently saw this line on a sign during a protest. The message is further emphasized during the torture scene, where the victim is famously told that 2 + 2 = 5 if that's what the party says it equals. Orwell shows us that people in power will try to control reality itself.
How many lights you see?
And it's our duty to resist their lies and stick to what we know is true.
There are 4 lights!
I know there's a lot of misinformation online these days. A lot of politicians and media outlets deliberately hide the truth. And thanks to AI, it's hard to even know what's real anymore sometimes. But some people respond to this situation by just doubting everything. And that's not really a solution either. Orwell shows us that if someone in power tries to contradict the evidence of our eyes, our job is to remember what is proven by evidence. If we can prove the truth, then we need to accept it. Finally, the most insidious theme is the control of language to dehumanize, especially the use of the word unpeople. If someone commits thought crime against the party, they lose their status as a human being, and therefore any and all dehumanizing atrocities becomes allowable. If you look at the 10 stages of genocide, you see the 4th stage is dehumanization, denying a group of people their status as human beings. This is a major red flag of authoritarianism, an early warning sign that a government is crossing the line and taking far too much control. Remember the classic poem by Martin Niemöller, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist." It's a reminder that authoritarian governments pick us off one by one. It's easy to stand by and watch as another group of people are labeled as unpeople. It's easy to do nothing while someone else's human rights are stripped away. But a government that will do that to other people will all too readily do the same to you. That's why it's crucial to resist any time human rights are violated, even if they're not happening to your side today. I believe this is why Orwell included a romance plot in 1984. In the face of totalitarianism, it is important to love. Love unifies. Love conquers all, even all-powerful evil governments. Love is the most human thing of all. And one final note about the film adaptation. There's technically 2 films. There was one made in 1956, which was considered a good film, but a very loose adaptation. Meanwhile, the film, 1984, was released in 1984, and it might just be one of the most faithful adaptations ever. It was even filmed in London in 1984, which is the exact time and place the book was set. That's got to be some sort of record. This film starring John Hurt is incredible. It's very well made. However, they do make one pretty significant change, and that is to focus much more on the romance. The plot with Julia is expanded. So in the book, the focus is Winston trying to rebel with books and finding other people who agree with him, and then the romance is very much a subplot. But in the movie, they flip that around and focus much more on a forbidden romance storyline. There's also quite a lot of nudity, which is an odd choice. Also in the movie, Winston is a fair bit more accepting of his life. Not entirely, but more accepting. And it's Julia who radicalizes him, wherein in the book it's very much the other way around. But in every other way, the movie is very faithful. Although the torture scenes in particular translate especially well to the big screen. They're much harder to watch, where in the book it's not quite as visually graphic. So in conclusion, these two books are more important than ever. I know you don't need me to comment on the state of the world, I'm just a booktuber, but I must encourage you that now is the best time to pick up a book, any book, and arm yourself with education, intelligence, and understanding. If there's one last thing we all need to learn from Orwell's books, it's that authoritarian governments thrive on an ignorant and uninformed population. The best thing we can do to fight authoritarianism is to retain our ability to think for ourselves.